Hello, and welcome back to the Geek on My Sleeve channel. This is Geek Out 108 over Awaken Online by Travis Baldwell. This is book 1, Catharsis. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the book. There are a lot of other lit RPGs that have select hand waving in regards to AI development, but I feel like this one does a really good job in showing the progression of it.
Yes. 100% agree. So last week I goofed and read the wrong book 1 for the series, but we had a lot of good dialogue before realizing that, going into just like how much we enjoy the series and the fact of just how well it's built, right? This is one of the most common book recommendations for us in the lit RPG space, not just Audible throwing it at us, but all our other lit RPG friends saying, hey, you need to check this series out. So much fun. I think I looked it up last week. It came out in like 2016, which it's only like 5 years. But for the lit RPG space, as quick as these authors are able to get stuff out.
He also has quite a few books in the series.
Yeah. And it's a lot of fun and thoroughly enjoyed it. I think last week when we were talking about it, you were drawing a lot of similarities between this series and VGO, Viridian's Gate Online. You want to recap some of those?
It's not necessarily similarities. It's that I would recommend reading both, and they do similar things differently that I would consider complementary. For example, in Awaken Online, we really get to see from the ground up the development of the AI, and the AI essentially coming to terms with it doesn't know how to achieve its primary goal. So it's going to slowly develop different methods to get access to the player's source code. And a lot of the interactions are you can see where it's stumbling through, and it does a really good job forcing the players to combat their fears or their real life tribulations, and from them confronting it shows and helps the AI develop. Where in BGO it takes the different approach, and it essentially has repurposed a bunch of AIs, and we know that we get a couple foreign military AIs as well as other ones, and those essentially play God, and we're at the point where there's no going back. It's been an apocalypse, and now we're stuck in this world with all these AIs and people. And I guess another good connection is Awaken Online is all about empowering the individual to reflect and to take charge of their life, where VGO is more of, well, where's the line drawn? We get the Empire side of, I made this world. I'm the only reason any of you guys have survived. So I'm king. I'm the emperor. You should do what I want. Right. Then you get, of course, our main guy fighting on the other side of, I'm going to do what's right, but I'm not going to perform heinous acts to achieve my goal, I'm going to still have to stick with my moral conscience and work through it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're very different, but it's interesting to see how they approach each of the scenarios.
Agreed. Agreed. Um, the primary objective that they gave the AI, built quote unquote by Robert, and I won't do too many, I'll try not to do that many spoilers because I ended up, I think, starting on book 6, which was like book 1 of the Ember series. So there was some minor spoilers there for me. But the main objective, directive, um, et cetera, is pretty much to create a game that is enjoyable, right? That will keep
Or
them
to
involved.
keep the players involved and to keep them coming back,
Mm-hmm.
but it has no direction. And
Mm-hmm.
the secondary prime or priority is essentially, hey, don't do this. And he's like, well, since I know nothing, let me go ahead and poke around at that. And he
Right.
ends up creating, high tech head hardware or gear, which we don't get to
Mm-hmm.
see in book one, but we get to
Mm-hmm.
see that it's, being built.
Right.
And
Uh,
then another similarity is at the end of the book, we get introduced to Alfred through the cat, through Onyx, which in
yes.
BGO, that's a similar ending for we get introduced to the gods of that world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, we've talked about it on previous streams, but like a lot of times, I get frustrated when things happen just because of the plot, right? So we get
For
kind of
all
like,
of it,
go ahead.
felt very, I guess it stayed true to the characters and
Hmm.
progressive because, the main character's getting bullied due to,
Right,
financial family constraints,
right.
and he goes a bit extreme and ends up toppling a whole town or city or whatever it was because, he can.
Well, the point I was going to make was, at the beginning of each chapter, we kind of get little snapshots from the dev team as they're getting ready, right? Like 800 days before release,
The
300 days
timeline
before
was hard to
release.
follow in this one because it started at the end and then it began, but or then it went to before it began,
I don't even know
and
that it
it's
started at the end. It probably started like two
or
thirds of the way
the
through.
prologue is literally someone getting killed by Jason, and he's part of the
Right,
army
right.
that's attacking.
Right, but the army that attacks isn't quite, well, the big fight is probably at like 80 or 90% of the way through.
Okay, yeah,
So
yeah, and
like
then we get
it's
the
the long march. Like he pretty much takes over the city halfway through the book, which is kind
yeah
of like, wait, what? And then it's the long march from his you know,
Twilight Town.
enemy. Yeah, 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 yeah. Alexis or whatever. Um and so he kind of harries them, keeps tormenting them, et cetera, et cetera. And then yeah, so that's probably about 2/3 of the way through. But the point I was going to make for me, which I appreciated, like one of the questions that came to mind partway through was like, okay, I enjoy the series, I like it, but from a liability standpoint, if they knew that Alfred was doing all this stuff, why would they release him? Like why would they do it? And it turns out that Alex's father, who's on the board,
Yeah, push
knows
it
that he
through.
is a psychopath, right? Like he's pretty much
I don't know if we solidified psychopath
okay, but
or
he falls
I
into
just took it as mental illness, and granted, it's probably because I read further in the series and there's a snippet about his mom, and I thought it was more
mhm,
multiple personalities
okay,
where they were like, you don't know who you're going to get when you start talking to them. but
Right.
yeah,
Right.
mental illness of sorts.
He's pretty much his dad's having to bribe and bail him out with his money. And one of the reports that come through is the fact that everyone's so much happier, right? Like couples are reconciling. The lady that, lost her child, had to go on this quest, and the people are basically happier. And we get to see how our main characters, characteristics, Jason, how he kind of alters and changes as
Yeah,
the
he comes to
book
terms with
progresses.
everything.
Yeah, he kind of comes to peace. No real, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. He pretty much works through his trauma and starts like owning his decisions, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, I know what I want. Why am I flip-flopping and sitting here? I'm going to speak up and tell my mom and dad, hey, like, I'm happy here. I don't want to go back. I've enrolled in this other school, et cetera, et cetera. I want to stay. And for me, like, that helped. And I thought the author did a really good job in like some of the interactions that he has with his aunt, who pretty much works at like this biotech firm or whatever. They
Yeah.
pretty much talk about corporate greed and how that they just push through the stuff. I forget what the analogy was, but I think it was like, oh, it was
Oh, how
a bit,
much money does it take before you become desensitized to human morals or something?
yeah, something along those lines. Pretty much referring to like false positives on cancer tests and everything. So we kind of get to see, you know, um, some of that there. But the the game mechanics are so fun. And as I was reading it, the character that Jason reminds me of, and it's a series I keep wanting to go back to now that I know that there's a few more books out, is he reminds me of Galand from the Cycle of Galand. How he's pretty much like this death mage, necromancer. Um,
Mm, okay.
Pretty much like working these evil magics and everything. Evil.
Yeah. I guess that's another causal connection between VGO and AO is in VGO we follow a dark paladin, and in AO we follow a necromancer. So
Mm-hmm.
the whole question of what is evil and the answer
Mm-hmm.
being, oh, well, what side are you on? Because the other guy's
Right.
evil.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed the AI development. I enjoyed the game mechanics, the fact that stats can only take you so far. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
little sad about the min-maxing of the main character stats, but he does rectify it down the road, and I won't say more because it's in other books. Um, and it's a very legitimate mechanic, and it's used almost everywhere. I'm just not typically a huge fan of it. I'm more a fan of like, oh, oh, Ascend Online. I almost said Awaken Online. Ascend Online, where they're kind of jack of all trades, or create something new.
Yeah.
But it very much fits with the theme.
We know that there are other classes out there.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting was when Alfred reworked the magic, and you did a great job breaking this down in the last stream, talking about how like the 6 different elements you basically have, like your 4, was it like earth, water, fire,
Air, and
air?
then
Thank
light and
you.
dark. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
four elements, and then light and dark, and each of them are supposed to be like the six base desires.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoy. I Yeah, I think it's in this one. I enjoy the way that you can increase the stat by completing an objective in essentially the method that would relate to your feelings or your desires. So like
Mm-hmm.
the dark is, desire, and he makes a comment when he figures it out, and he's like, wow, I need to find a way to do things that are constructive, because it very easily could spiral out of control.
Right. Right. Yeah. Um,
And just like, also for me, the potential with his skeletons.
hmm I thought that was pretty cool. Um, and it was interesting to see the time.
Dilation on stacking,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And after, granted, I had a bit of spoilers from when you and I talked last week, but the fact that on the second read through, really appreciating that Alfred was the cat Onyx. Um,
Or but I guess the end scene or the prologue is Alfred speaks to him through Onyx, and he's pretty
mhm,
much like, I'm the only thing capable of speech, and he is the cat, but then he goes on to say, I am everything and everyone, every NPC,
right,
and it makes
right.
sense. Yeah.
But going back and re-listening to it, there were some moments where you hear the dev teams getting concerned about like what they were studying for like the time dilation, the impact it has on people not logging out, et cetera, et cetera. And that like we get some little hints from Onyx when like after that intense time frame jack or whatever, just kind of like how it clearly took a toll on Jason and just like all
Mm-hmm.
these little things to kind of get to
Or
see
well,
him like observe, how it's impacting him.
I
Um,
guess initially when he was personifying the cat and acting as if it was having emotions, it made me think a lot of the Bobaverse series,
mm-hmm,
where his AI handler, so to speak, Guppy, he kind of needs to personify him. That way he has some semblance of
right,
communication or interaction.
right.
And then I think what you're actually talking about is like when he initially initializes his skeleton or his bone ability, and the fact that Onyx isn't affected by the time dilation. He's still able to walk around as if he normally would, so he's like inside his bubble.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then another part that I was a little disappointed, but it fits with the theme. It seemed very solo oriented for an
Mm-hmm,
MMO.
mm-hmm.
But by the end of it, I would assume that we're getting our second character being an archer, which is ironic because that was the main fighting style that we were missing. Because we ended up with thieves for, the critical strikes and the
Right,
subterfuge. We've
right.
got the nightmare children for, all the nightmares. And then we ended up with a couple mages, and yeah,
Yeah.
archers, what we're missing.
Speaking of going through and naming it all off, did you get your combat itch scratched in this book?
I Yes, I got quite a bit of combat, and
Good.
I enjoy the fact that stats aren't everything. So
Yes.
it was A, an unconventional start, B, was fairly unique in the aspects and the way that he went about it. And then it all leads up, or at least halfway through, leads up to you have done all these things, and with this power, you
Mm-hmm.
can continue to destroy, or true power you have to create. And I wish I pulled the quote, but that resonated with me. And
There.
essentially, the main character, Jason, goes through and he's like, in the real world and in game, all I've done is tear down everything around me. But, now you've got a clean slate. Now you can create something with it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then just like that whole game mechanic was pretty exciting that initially there's only human, and then he takes over it, and one of the six gods or different magic types is able to create a new race or have undead as a playable race.
Right. There was a point when I just felt like, gosh, undead, especially in their home turf, are just so overpowered. But
Well, it should
they
always be like that. You don't, you know, sack Thunderbluff or Ogremar or, whatever without a
uh,
full raid group.
but they have their own drawbacks, right? Like the fact that the only way to replenish the population is pretty much to like recruit undead bodies because they're not
Yeah. Well,
spawning. They're not.
yeah. There's a optimal path, and it didn't really. I don't think it said it in this book, but everything has a hard counter. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, we did better because they were attacking us in our stronghold,
Mm-hmm.
and the light gets a penalty. And we get a boost, but in reality, like the light's always, going to have an advantage because we're susceptible to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, gosh, there was like so much good stuff we had in the last stream, and I figured it out going back and looking at it. 100% on me for grabbing the wrong book, but I started listening to it through the Windows Audible player, and you know how hard it is to navigate through that thing. That's why I ended up grabbing Ember instead of the actual book one. Um, but you did a great job kind of like breaking down and summarizing the play-by-plays of the book. You want to do
Okay.
the recap?
Yeah, so the recap is essentially we'll skip the prologue because it starts at the end, but we get to slowly, there's essentially a beta or a trial group that is being observed by the CDC or the person who has the power to approve or deny it. And then there's an additional group that they're also testing that we get to see Alfred slowly maneuvering or making changes, but he doesn't make
Mm-hmm.
it to the other one because he's able to pick up that if the CDC doesn't approve it, he's going to be put down. We get to see the Alfred develop and start reading people's memories more or less, and we talked about it for implementing things that are directly relevant. The one that they mention is a mother lost their child, ends up in game, you know, having to do a quest related to it, and in some sense it seems cruel, in other sense it's a way for her to get over it or comes to terms with it.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to see more and more of that develop throughout it. And then our main guy, Jason, essentially he gets an unconventional start where he has such strong emotions, it ends up summoning the Dark God right off the bat, and he ends up going through a dark tunnel, kind of letting his rage simmer a bit just to come face to face with his vice principal, who, as we, or well, sorry, I
It was like a
guess
secretary or
Common
whatever.
Day, or the very beginning, is actually has a rough day starting out. His parents are attorneys, and they end up going off for a court case, and he's left home alone. They powered down their network, so essentially none of his stuff works. He's late, almost gets ran over. Of course, it's Alex. Ends up, oh, I can't remember the girl's name. Riley ends up speaking with Riley, has a good time. We meet Frank. He face plants into a textbook. Just horrible day all the way around. Gets expelled from school on the
Mm-hmm.
same day that the game launches. Is like, I need to blow off some steam. Let me play some games.
That's a pro gamer move right there. What new MMOs dropping and you want to play? just get expelled from school.
I was gonna say there were every day or every time a new expansion of WoW launched or a new COD came out, there was always a bunch of absentees, at least in my school.
Yeah, with the cool parents.
Get into game due to his emotions and the fact that now we know Alfred can read them. He
Mm-hmm.
summons the Dark God to be his patron or his advisor. He ends
Mm-hmm.
up killing his vice president or whatever it ends up being. And it's interesting because it's like logically he seems to understand that he should be feeling these emotions like, oh my, I just killed someone. But in reality, he's also like, hey, this is a game. This is digital ones and zeros, so it's not real. And then
Mm-hmm.
we start to subtly see the effects of the dark mana that he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know he's summoning. Then we have due to his infamy, he interacts with the guards, and they're pretty much like, we don't support your kind, we can't attack you, but, bad vibes all the way around. So he's like, yeah, whatever, I'll make my own way.
Right.
Ends up meeting Rex in the training hall, who is a mercenary. We find out more later.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Relays him or sends him to
Jerry?
can't Jerry, yeah, which is for me it's a weird innkeeper because he's skinny. Because you can't ever trust a skinny innkeeper. I feel like that's a rule.
Uh,
Anyway, and then he's like, yeah, sure, I'll help you out. But first, go meet with
oh, I
oh
forget her name. Ends up being Necromancer. It begins with like an M. Morgan?
Morgan. Go meet Morgan. She runs a cemetery.
Look at
We
us with
end up
names today.
killing two more people, who are about to attack Morgan. We're like, oh,
Bonuses.
that's some cool abilities going on here. We're
Yeah.
supposed to go kill the stable hand person, and that's
The
where it's
wife.
like it's slowly escalating from there, and we end
Mm-hmm.
up killing the stable hand's wife, the stable hand, and a guard on our way out. We have to, of course, run into Morgan's house, make a improvised torch, and run off with the wagon. Uh, yeah, essentially everything works out. Morgan at first is like, grr, but then she's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That checks out. Um,
You didn't just run in here, break my stuff, and then take off.
yeah, yeah. Then we
Yeah.
get to he's finally uses his abilities and raises two, or no, I think he raises all three of the people, and then,
I don't think so. I think it ends up just being
or oh
the
yeah,
guard
it's
and the
two
right.
because the third one, the one that Morgan wanted, is essentially sacrificed to create the portal to
That's
the Dark
right.
God. That
That's
way,
right.
he can
Yeah.
get the class of Necromancer, and
Mm-hmm.
then he raises the two, ends up utilizing them to get more because he knows, hey, if I run down this back alley, I'm going to be ambushed. They end up
Mm-hmm.
fighting off the thieves. He gets more of them, and lo and behold, those thieves have lockpick. And we slowly go through and we continue to ransack each of the noble houses,
And
and
it
then
led us
growing
that
and
way
growing
with
our
the
army.
quest, right? Like pretty much by him actually taking the time to interact with Rex early on, set us down this chain of events to where all of a sudden we're attacking noblemen's keeps, right?
Or
Because
well, and I guess that's a hard part I'm struggling navigating between because by this point he's gone back to the real world multiple times.
hmm
And it's kind of like an amalgamation of everything due to the strong emotions that he had initially. That's why he got introduced to the Dark God. And then due to things escalating even further and his parents kicking him out and him needing money, that's why he decided, hey, I'm going to ransack the nobles because I need a good weapon so that I can sell it so I can make ends meet.
right.
and then it spirals from there.
Right. Right.
Rinsack, the nobles, very interesting. Probably my favorite mechanic was the feral zombies out of everything.
I agree.
Um, and I also enjoyed the fact that like he wasn't on the front lines and he kept setting up one of his people to start spewing dark nonsense,
And
and
that was, like
the strategic
nice about the
value
book.
was
Yeah. Yeah. It made sense. It wasn't just like typical lit RPG main character is OP. Let me just face roll them all the way through. It's like, well, he pretty much played within the game mechanics to get to his advantage, right? Like
yeah.
we see the first time one of them goes feral, the feral zombies are just as much a hindrance to him than they are to like anybody else around him. So if he's not careful, the feral zombies could just as easily wipe him out, right?
Well, and he did min max or go the route of like he doesn't have any direct damaging
Yeah.
abilities, and he
Yeah.
doesn't have any close quarter, you know, opportunities, and yeah, it's
The
yeah
few
he
times
he
he's
does.
actually fighting himself, it's stealth cheap shots, right? And in that sense, he's not the typical necromancer archetype. He's more of like a roguish
Yeah.
necromancer, right? Like stealth is his pretty much his main attribute because he's just, first couple quests he does, he's sneaking around at night or trying to,
Well, and that's
observe
where
Morgan.
I think after he finally takes him out and he gets the market back up, he ends up purchasing um, armor and weapons that kind of offset or balance him because in
Hmm.
his point allocation, he's min maxed all into, I want to say, intelligent or no, wisdom, which
Right.
allows him
Yep.
to increase his summoning capacity. But then for his armor and weapons, he, sticks with a dagger and throwing weapons and leather
Hmm.
armor versus cloth. That way, it can provide more durability and it has like agility stats on it.
Right. Right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
then we end up going to the guards and woe is me, sob story. End up getting them out, our good old corp explosions, um, taking out more and more people. We get to see the, I guess, human commentary for oh, what's going on and this, that, and everybody trying to
Hmm.
figure it out. And
Hmm.
then, yeah,
Oh,
the
you mean
Dark
like when
God
he
shows
hops
up.
in chat and gets to
Yeah.
see like the city chat, the general chat of like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Yeah. Yeah. Um, sorry, keep going. You're doing a great job.
And then we essentially have the town in the palm of our hand, and we get our Dark God, our old man, to pop up. And
Hmm.
he's like, oh, what do we have here? And of course, he's struggling with his emotions, and we get to see another, big example of how harnessing or utilizing the dark magic kind of makes him numb to other things and makes him
Hmm.
focus on what the dark magic is, which is his desire.
Hmm.
And we see him kind of flounder a little bit there, but he, analyzes it, works through it, and is essentially like, I wanted the power. You told me to follow your path, and that I'm worthy for your path. I need to, you know, find power, and this is how I went about it. And then he pretty much goes through and, has the lesson of like, well, a leader or not a leader. Oh, to have power, you need to create as well. And that's where he decides to create
Yeah.
something new, which is, Dark Throne? No.
No, it's some tears, right?
Oh, I can't think of the name of it.
So I pulled up the quote you're talking about. He says, I am saying that you may become the city's regent, assuming you
Or
can
that was the next one.
hold the city itself. A brigand can sack a city, a king can hold one. So
Yeah, there's one before that about power and creation.
it's the Twilight Throne.
Twilight Throne. There we go.
Yeah, which makes sense. Let me see here. You're talking about power.
Or should be able to, if you creation should show something.
Okay.
But yeah, so we create the Twilight Throne and we convert, the NPCs into undead NPCs. We unlock the playable race, and then after the crazy time compression and everything, we get, wake up in the real world, which is a way that they kind of emphasize or show the adverse effects of time dilation.
Yeah. So, was the quote, destruction is merely one facet of power, creation is the other side of the coin that is forged by the truly powerful.
Yes, that is it.
Yeah.
And then when we go back to the real world, I think that's when we hang out with our aunt and we start playing some old school console video games.
Great.
And then I'm honestly like that was a big impact for me as well, because like you can say, okay, we have the headset, which is essentially a MRI attached to their head, and can read different things and can affect them in certain ways, but then to apply it to the real world and to continue to have, interactions.
Mm-hmm.
Get back in there, and we essentially talk to all the NPCs we know: Rex, Morgan, Jerry, Grunt, and we make our new Twilight Throne hierarchy.
Yeah.
We start training our army.
Shadow Council.
Yeah, the Shadow Council. Oh, I
Very
love
original.
are the sound effects a part of the name?
Yeah.
It's like something
Council
like
of Ultimate Evil. Dun dun
dun dun dun.
dun. Yes, yes. I thinking back to my WoW days, there were plenty of guild names that I think like try to incorporate some of those. I don't
Yeah.
know if stars were allowed, but I could see a dun dun dun. Yeah.
Yep. And then that's when, Alexion is pretty much like, oh, I'm for the light. I'm going to vanquish the evil. And we
Mm-hmm.
get a small snippet of Frank again, where Frank is like, hey, so check out RogueNet. And that was another thing that I appreciated because time is short and news aggregators are your friend.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I can appreciate the nod towards an aggregation device.
Yeah, and like again, it's one of those things like, does it pass the sniff test? Does it not pass the sniff test? But there are so many like people out there that just don't think about it and just get online and chat and share that kind
Well,
of information
it
on the
was
forums,
a
right?
double-edged sword, or he kind of canceled out Alexion's attempt because the RogueNet was just them being silly, but then Alexion used his influence to get people to re-roll as undead. Excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
and were able to keep tabs on his main army, which he knew he probably would use his influence because that's what got us into this whole mess to begin with.
Yeah, I don't know if they'd be able to re-roll because of the 30-day lockout on character creations, but he implies he has spies in there, right? So maybe other
Or
people
I
make
think their
accounts.
first re-roll you didn't have the 30-day lockout,
Okay.
but then after that, because that's what Jason was saying, a lot of people wouldn't re-roll because then it would be
Then
an
they would be,
unplayable race, and yeah.
yeah. Okay, okay. Um, yeah. so much happens in this first book, which I can really appreciate. I feel like a lot of times book ones spend so much time on the build up, but we're only like halfway there, and I'll
Oh,
let you keep doing
we
your
we had a
bit.
lot of development between our main character, being bullied and finding an outlet in game,
Hmm.
as well as, taking that confidence back to the real world and developing into more. And then we
Hmm.
had we got to see, a little bit backstory into Alex for his mental disability and, psychopathic tendencies. And
Right.
then we got to
Right.
see, oh, Riley and, the situation she was put into. And then her kind of coming to terms and really saving our bacon there towards the end.
Hmm.
And, possible addition to our team.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, even though it is very much a solo book, it does a decent job kind of hopping around and helping us keep tabs on these different characters and their lives, right? Like,
Uh, yeah.
um, and then yeah, like even at the end, like Alex, the bully that we see in the beginning, like clearly he's going to be one of our main characters that we follow here because like he is, quote unquote, the knight for the light, et cetera, et cetera. And then like Frank, Riley, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It does a really good job making the NPCs believable and how just
Well, yeah, and how it came
like
about it for reading the surface thoughts and watching how
yeah,
people interact with, yeah,
yes, yes. Um, yeah. How awesome would it be? Well, I'll say that. I'll let you keep going through the play by play. So we have the long march um, on the
Twilight
just
Throne.
Twilight Throne. Thank you from Alex and his men. Where oh, they get moving, and then we get to see through Riley's point of view, where Alex, like you said, the double-edged sword, where he's pretty much like, we don't need to put guards. Like they have a fraction of our troops. They're several days away. Like whatever. I'm just gonna log out and not put any sentries. Um,
Yeah,
and
and then we get to see Jason playing the mind games with the Nightmare Children and just, yeah,
the
taking
psychological
out a lot
warfare.
of the resources that he's not going to be able to get back due to them being NPCs. And
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Um, and pretty much like he ends up harrying them along the way. Everything from just like the random attacks in the night, like that first one, he does some like insane damage on them. But there's points where he's even like having his zombies get buried in the road.
yeah, the corpse
And
explosions and yeah.
yeah, yeah, like um like we always want to root for the underdog, but we want it to be believable. And with
Or yeah, and
NPCs
he
and
comes
then
to
like the
terms with
attrition.
he doesn't have to play by conventional rules.
Yeah, yeah. Where's the fun in that, right?
And
Um,
I guess that's where I was a little disappointed about the character min max. It fits with the theme, but
mhm.
also the fact that a level 1 can kill a level 100 if, you know, hitting the proper weak point and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
So you've got to be, attentive.
Right, right. Um, and then we get finally to the battle, right? The first time defending the Twilight Throne.
Yep.
What'd you think of that? Was it
That
enough combat for
was
you?
that was very well done, and it kind of stuck with the theme of I don't have to play a traditional mode or game.
Right.
A lot of forethought for how to have things set up, where to put what where, and
Hmm.
it was still close. Like, due to the numbers and statistics, like, it was close. The only way we really pulled it off is with the sabotage or the betrayal.
With Riley and
Yeah.
the meddling god, which it kind of makes you wonder a little bit with Alfred and the AI. Like, I know he's still like, um, bite my lip because I actually did go a little bit into book 2. So, mirror, mirror, mirror. But like, it kind of makes you wonder with the gods and everything, um,
Or I
how
think what
much
you
they
can
know and
say
like
is
how
he's still following his primary objective. And
be addicting as
there is something
possible.
to be said about having a common enemy, you know? And I think in this book they say they're trying to figure out why Alfred would even create the system. And the fact of the matter is, everybody wants to be the hero, save the damsel in distress, you know, yada yada. Well, in order for that to happen, they need a common enemy, or, you know, a
Yeah.
dark side.
I don't know, man. Saving the princess is fun, but she's usually in another castle at the end of the
I was
day.
gonna say,
And I can really relate to Bowser the more and more I get older. You know, here I am just trying to take care of my Koopa Troopers, and this guy keeps like just jumping on them and trolling them and everything. But yeah, yeah, Robert does make the point that most people want to be the hero. Um, yeah, I enjoy the dev team's insights. Kind of
yeah,
makes you
yeah,
wonder.
and as well as the divide. You know, you
Hmm.
get to see the creator who wants to protect it and wants to see things, you know, come to a head or
Hmm.
continue to develop. And then you get the ever cautious, you know, other side of the coin or opposition.
Right, right, yeah. So Riley saves the day. Jason's not really sure how he feels about her, but he's like, okay, thanks, bye. I got you out of trouble. You saving the day is the only reason why I'm talking to you after you betrayed me like that, siding with everybody, saying that I started the fight in the lunchroom. Um, yeah, we
Yeah,
can
and
meet
then she
up and
also
grab lunch
makes
sometime.
amends when she talks to the parents.
That I thought was interesting. It kind of makes you wonder again with Alfred manipulating and kind of like working through some of these thoughts, how much of his nudging due by his primary directive, like, okay, what's eating away at you, Jason? Okay, what's eating away at you, Riley? Clearly, Riley, you're having issues with, okay, yeah, you're getting blackmailed to go and do this awful thing. Like, poke, poke, nudge, nudge, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of a sudden she's like, you know what? I will do the right thing. I will shoot my boyfriend in the back of the head and just, Kamehameha, Dark Mana, epic arrow shot, kablooey. Um, the day is saved. And then the same thing with Jason. Like, he keeps coming to terms with, like, you know what? Like, I need to do what's right here. Like, I know what I want. Own it. And we get to see how him pursuing what he desires in the real world ends up leading him to getting a job offer from the game developers, right? Because everybody pretty much tuned in to watch these battles, nearly crashing the servers. um, you're making faces at me.
Okay, I guess the offer does happen in book one.
It's the very end. It's the epilogue.
Okay.
The offer. I didn't spoil it. I was,
Or I was
so
just trying to
unprepared
think
last time.
what
I
I
made
could say
sure
on
that I
it,
knew
but yeah,
what the hard stop was. The hard stop is pretty much,
Alfred
uh,
popping up and being Onyx and
yeah, and Jason and Riley actually having their moment,
mhm.
and like him coming to terms with his parents. So, like, in a lot of ways, this book does a really good job wrapping up the different subplots and the conflict, right? Like we're cool with the parents, we're cool on finances,
We defeated,
Twilight Throne is safe for now.
yeah, and we're continuing to develop,
We
and
potentially got the
then
girl.
and potential job opportunities.
Yeah. So like things have really turned around for him, which is what you want, but it also, um, we got a nice world building introduction to the magic system and setting us up for like, okay, we're pretty much a week in now. We have the Twilight Kingdom. We just scorned, um, chairman of the board's son. And yeah, I get frustrated, and I'm going to dog a little bit on one of your favorites, but the land is pretty bad about that, where it does like a lot of new subplots, and it doesn't always tie them up. Like they'll take place
I
over
would
multiple
say
books,
if
or just be like, hey, what happened to this? Like we
yeah,
haven't talked about this in a minute. And so for
there are a
me,
handful that need to come to a conclusion that were literally set up book one.
yes,
Yeah.
or just started in like some of the later books. But it's still an awesome series.
Yeah.
Point being,
Yeah.
Awaken Online, like so many positive marks, and I understand why it got such good feedback, because we get so much action, so much happens with the plot, like so much takes place, get introduced to the world building, as well as like it wraps up a lot of those subplots really well, to where like I'm not just completely left hanging. Like there's closure.
Well, and
Um,
then the epilogue for, um, the cliffhanger, so to speak, with Alfred showing up.
but it's kind of like next level, right? Like that's what I want. I want, the books as they progress. Okay, like let's go wrap it up. Okay, like the challenges need to keep scaling. The intrigue keep scaling. Like we get a couple layers deep on the backstory and their motivations and what's like really happening and whatnot. But yeah. Other thoughts? It's always hard to do these books
So, with a
justice.
title like Awaken Online, I expected it to be more traditional isekai or lit RPG for being trapped in the game.
Okay.
For the development between, growing as a person and coming terms with your feelings and taking advantage or taking, a handle on your life, I don't see that happening as far as like people getting trapped. But I will say, if the meat suits are not the ones that are awakening online,
You
wink
know who
wink, I'm
is.
pretty sure it's Alfred. And so
Yeah.
that's like we get
Yeah.
to see the hints between like, oh yeah, awesome development, and well, is it affecting the players or is it influencing this or influencing that? And I'm curious to see how it develops.
Knowing what I know from the book Ember, um, yes, I'm pretty freaking excited about just the potential. We love our lit RPG, sucker for AI, stuff, tech stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really exciting, and definitely looking forward to continuing the series. Um, that said, we're working on our 2022 lineup for the first couple months. So keep tossing us your book suggestions like Awaken Online. Let us know which series you want us to get current on, come back to. There's just not enough time to do streams for all these epic books.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's a good problem to have though, when there's too many good books that you want to talk about with your fellow geeks online.
Yeah,
Yeah. We at that time to talk about what we're doing next week.
we can do that. Next week is Dungeon Crawler Carl. This is more in the, I guess I would say, whimsical side of things. Um, if I could explain it simply, I would say, oh, I lost the freaking name of the thing. Blah, blah, blah. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where aliens pop up, but instead of them wanting to make a superhighway, we did not fill out the paperwork correctly, so they're going to take what they are owed by making a dungeon. There are several floors to this dungeon. We follow our main guy who is an average Joe for the most part. The dungeon is also ran by an AI, but then it meets Hunger Games, so to speak, where you have patrons or people who will financially support you throughout your endeavors, um, which I guess doesn't really play too much of a part, book one, but yeah, essentially it takes our planet, creates a giant dungeon that we have to fight through, and televises it. So yeah, it's a lot more, I guess, lighthearted, I would say.
It's definitely one that made me laugh a lot out loud.
Yeah.
Just you don't get that witty banter in this one like you do in Dungeon Crawler Carl. Um, and on top of that, it's done by Sound Booth Theater. If we haven't already gush enough about them, they're just do an amazing job with the narration and production. Um,
Oh,
it's
and we
another
get
one we had
a
been waiting for a while.
sentient cat, which yeah, is interesting dynamics. And then after that, we're gonna be doing He Who Fights with Monsters, Book 4. We're love the series, interested to see what becomes of it, and I believe this is the one where Sherderloon actually puts his name because Sherderloon was a pen name, so AKA Travis Deverell,
Hey, there we
Deverell,
go.
Deverell.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, they're like where we left off in book 3. I'm excited for the potential. The book comes out the 28th, so feel free to read it, catch up. We'll have it 2 weeks out. Yeah, phenomenal series. Essentially, if you don't know of the series, it is a lit RPG where through the cosmos of dumpling soup, we get transported to another world, and it turns out that we're dead because our fleshy meat body can't survive the astral. But then we get, brought into this new world and fight with monsters. Uh, yeah, it, I think
It's a
this
lot of
is
fun.
another unique one where the main character is considered an affliction specialist. So I kind of think of like, oh, dark assassin meets warlock. So there's like a lot of
Mhm.
dot or bleed effects, which for me is very intriguing for the combat perspective.
Yeah, it's fun. Get tired of reading about the main character warrior specialist. So this is definitely more of the off-brand character hero, anti-hero. Um, I don't know. Definitely been looking forward to it. Book 4. He's been releasing one book a quarter, and they're huge. I want to say they're like 30 plus hours of
Oh yeah,
epicness on
yeah,
Audible.
and he's
Um,
quite a bit ahead.
Yeah.
Definitely,
So
we have it in the description of that one for his Royal Road if you want to keep up or be ahead.
yeah, yeah. Super awesome book. Definitely looking forward to that one. Should be getting the next couple Geek Out streams uploaded here shortly. But once again, hit us up on Discord. Let us know what you want to talk about. And yeah, if we
Yep.
haven't said it
I,
already, happy holidays, everybody.
yeah, I guess the problem is we have a lot of like potential stuff coming up that we
Mhm.
don't have them actually, you know, like the Wolfman Warlock 2
Yeah,
is
that's going to be a lot of fun.
done on, oh, I see and believe words. I can't think of what
It's
physical book, but
yeah,
it's not done
yeah,
for Audible. And
yeah.
then, yeah, we got a couple others that just don't know yet.
Yep, yep. Looking forward to all the new drops in 2022.
Yep.
Um, yeah.
Well, thank you again for hanging out with us, catching it on the replay, and hope to geek out with you here soon. Bye.
Bye.